Serafina Voss had never been the kind of woman anyone looked at twice. She lived at the far edge of the Blackmore Pack's territory, in a small stone cottage that the pack had given her not out of kindness but out of obligation. No one knew where she had come from. No one knew who her parents were. She had been left at the pack's gate as a baby, wrapped in a plain cloth with no name, no note, and no explanation. The pack had raised her the way someone keeps a stray, not with love, but with just enough care to say they had done their duty. She had no wolf. That was the thing people always came back to. Every member of the pack, even the youngest children, could feel their wolf inside them, a warm, living presence that grew stronger with age. Serafina had nothing, or at least, that was what she believed. That was what everyone believed. She worked quietly. She cooked for the pack's lower households, helped tend the herb gardens behind the main hall, and kept to herself. She did not complain. She did not ask for more than she was given. She had learned early that invisible was the safest thing to be. But the blood moon came once a year, and the blood moon did not care about safety. The ceremony was the most important night in any wolf's life. Every pack in the Northern Territories gathered together under the open sky, and the moon goddess revealed fated mates. It was sacred. It was ancient. It was the night that changed everything, for everyone. This year, the gathering was larger than usual. Alphas, betas, and elders had traveled from dozens of packs to witness the ceremony at Blackmore, because Blackmore's alpha was expected to finally receive his mate, Alpha Cade Ashford. The name alone was enough to make rooms go quiet. He was tall, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, and coldly intelligent. He had led the Blackmore pack to dominance at the age of 23. He was now 28, unmated, and considered the most powerful alpha in living memory. Everyone expected his mate to be remarkable. A high-ranking she-wolf, a daughter of a great bloodline, someone worthy of standing beside a man like him. No one expected Serafina Voss. When the blood moon rose above the hills and the ceremony began, the air changed in a way that had nothing to do with weather. It thickened, it trembled, and then, without warning, without any build-up or ceremony of its own, the bond snapped into place. Serafina felt it first, a sudden warmth in her chest, like something that had been sleeping her entire life had opened its eyes. She looked up from the back of the crowd, where she had been standing quietly, not expecting anything, and her gaze landed on Cade Ashford. He felt it too. She could see it in the way his body went still. For one single moment, the world was perfectly quiet. Then the crowd understood what had happened, and the quiet shattered. Her? The girl with no wolf? That cannot be right. That is not possible. The whispers came from every direction. People turned to look at her, some with pity, some with shock, some with barely hidden laughter. Serafina stood in the middle of all of it, and kept her chin level. She would not look down. She had promised herself long ago that she would never let them see her look down. Cade's beta, a steady and loyal man named Rowan, moved close to Cade's side and spoke low. "Accept the bond for now. We can sort this out privately. Don't do anything here, in front of everyone." But Cade was not a man who did things quietly when he had already decided something. He looked across the crowd at Serafina. He took in her plain clothes, her small frame, her lack of wolf energy, the way the crowd around her had stepped back, as though she were something embarrassing. He looked at the hundreds of alpha and beta guests watching him, and he made his decision. He walked forward until he stood in the open center of the courtyard. His voice carried clearly over the crowd. "I, Alpha Cade Ashford of Blackmore, reject you, Serafina Voss, as my fated mate and Luna." He said it in the old formal language. He said it completely and correctly. There was no taking it back. The pain hit Serafina like a wall. A bond rejection was said to be one of the worst things a wolf could experience, a tearing sensation, deep in the chest, as though something essential was being pulled out by the roots. She felt all of it, every single piece of it. But she did not cry, she did not speak, she did not beg. She stood still for 3 full seconds. Then she turned around and walked away. The crowd parted for her. She did not look at any of them. She walked through the open gate, down the main road, and into the eastern woods without looking back once. The woods had always been her place. She had gone there her whole life when the pack became too heavy to carry. There was a section of old stone ruins near the Vale River, half buried in moss and tree roots, where no one else ever went. The wolves avoided it. They said it felt strange there. They said something old lived in the stone. Serafina had never found it strange. She had always found it peaceful. She sat down on a broken column and let the silence hold her. For a long time she just breathed. The pain in her chest was still there, sharp and constant. The rejection had not killed her, but it had not left her alone either. She pressed her hand against her sternum and breathed through it. And then something happened that had never happened before. Beneath her palm, she felt a heartbeat that was not her own. It was slow, deep, old, in a way she could not explain, the way a mountain is old, or the way the ocean floor is old. She had felt something like it before, faintly, on quiet nights, but now it was not faint. Now it was awake. Silver light gathered in her palms. She stared at it. The ground beneath her feet cracked in a thin line, and small white flowers pushed through the break. The river nearby went completely still, its surface flat as glass. A voice came then, not from outside her, but from somewhere below thought, below memory. It was female and ancient and completely calm. "You were not born to be a Luna," the voice said. "You were born to be something they stopped having a word for long before you arrived." Serafina did not run. She did not panic. Some part of her had been waiting for this her entire life without knowing it. The voice gave her images rather than explanations. She saw a bloodline older than any pack, a family of women and men who did not belong to wolves the way wolves belonged to packs. They were something prior to all of that. They had made the first agreement with the moon goddess, thousands of years ago, the agreement that gave wolfkind the ability to form packs, to claim territory, to establish alpha hierarchies. The bloodline that had made that possible was called the Aurelian line, not a branch of the tree, the root. The Aurelians did not carry wolves inside them the way other wolves did. They were not vessels for one animal. They carried the essence of all wolves, every alpha, every bloodline, every generation, distilled into one living form. The wolf in them was not small. It was everything. Her power had been sealed at birth, to protect her. Whoever had left her at Blackmoor's gate had done it deliberately, choosing a pack strong enough to keep her body safe, without knowing what they were keeping. The seal had held for 22 years. The rejection broke it. When Serafina walked back out of the woods 3 days later, the trees near the path bent slightly as she passed, not from wind. Birds landed on branches ahead of her and went still, watching. A deer on the road looked at her, and then lowered its head slowly, the way subjects lower their heads before royalty. She noticed all of it. She did not perform any of it. She walked back toward the pack's main hall. Inside, Cade was not doing well. He had not slept since the ceremony. His wolf, which had always been his most obedient and controlled instinct, had become almost unmanageable, pacing, restless, alternating between rage and grief in a way that made no sense. The bond he had rejected was not fading. It was getting louder. He sat in his study with the curtains closed and told himself it would pass. Rowan came to him on the second morning and chose his words carefully. "A bond rejection is supposed to silence the connection, Cade. What you are describing is not silence. It's getting stronger, not weaker. Whatever the bond was responding to in her, it is not something that follows our rules." "Leave it alone," Cade said. "I don't think we can," Rowan said quietly, and left. On the third day, 3 guests arrived at the pack's main hall. They had not been invited for this occasion. They had simply come, drawn, each of them had said separately, by something they could not name and could not resist. They were the 3 oldest alphas still living, men who had seen centuries of pack history, men who had built and broken empires of territory. Alpha Draven of the Iron Fang, Alpha Soren of the Deep Ridge, Alpha Callum of the Ashwood. They sat in the hall with Cade and his council, conducting what was supposed to be a routine political conversation about border territories. Cade appreciated the distraction. He focused on maps and numbers, and kept his hands flat on the table to stop them from shaking. Then the hall doors opened. No one had announced her. No guard had let her through. The doors simply opened, and Serafina walked in. The political conversation stopped mid-sentence. Alpha Draven rose from his chair. He was a man over 3 centuries old. He had not risen for anyone in living memory. He looked at Serafina with an expression no one in the hall had ever seen on his face, something that was not quite awe and not quite fear, but lived in the space between them. He moved away from the table. He went to one knee. The room went completely silent. Alpha Soren and Alpha Callum exchanged one look. Then they rose from their chairs and knelt as well. Cade's council members stared. Several of them took an involuntary step backward. One of the elders, a blind woman named Mira who had been carried into the hall in her chair, turned her sightless face toward Serafina and began to cry without any sound. She said one word, barely above a whisper. Aurelian. Cade stood up so quickly his chair scraped the stone floor. He looked at Serafina, and what he saw stopped him in place. She looked like herself, same face, same quiet expression, but something surrounded her that had no name he could use. The air near her moved differently. The silver light in her eyes was not a trick of the torches, and the three most powerful men in the history of his world were on their knees in front of her. "What is happening?" he said. Alpha Draven answered without rising. "You rejected your Luna before every Alpha and Elder here. You judged her by what you could see, and you found her lacking. We do not fault you. None of us knew. Not even her." He paused. "But we know now. This woman is the last living descendant of the Aurelian line. She is not a packless orphan. She is not low-ranking. She is the reason the rest of us exist. The Alpha bloodlines, all of them, including yours, were born from the agreement her ancestors made with the moon goddess. She does not carry one wolf. She carries the origin of all of them." The hall was so quiet that the river outside could be heard. Serafina stood at the center of all of it and did not perform anything. The silver light breathed gently at her fingertips. She looked at no one in particular. She was simply present, and her presence was enough to make the air in the room feel ancient. She spoke only once, and her voice carried a low harmonic underneath it that every wolf in the room felt in their chest without hearing it with their ears. "I am not here because I want acknowledgement," she said. "I am here because this pack has always been my responsibility. Not because of the bond, because this is where I was placed, and I do not leave what is mine." Cade sat down, not in a chair, on his knees, on the floor, because his legs simply would not hold him anymore. His wolf was not pacing now. It was completely still, in the way a river goes still before it changes course. He had rejected her in front of everyone. He had looked at her and seen nothing worth keeping, and she had not broken. She had not come back for revenge, or to humiliate him, or to take anything from him. She had come back because she had called this place hers, and she meant it without anger. He tried to find words. Nothing he could form felt adequate. He said the only thing that was completely true. "I was wrong." Serafina looked at him. The silence between them was long and honest, and had no performance in it. "Yes," she said. "You were." She did not take him back. She did not reach for the bond. She did not make it easy or dramatic. She turned and walked toward the far end of the hall, where the elder woman Mira was waiting, with tears still on her face, and she sat beside her, and she began to listen. The three ancient alphas remained for many weeks. They taught Serafina the history of her bloodline, the parts that had been hidden, the parts that had been forgotten, the parts that were only passed in whispers between old women who had kept the memory alive for 300 years. She learned without rushing. She held everything with the same quiet steadiness she had held her whole life, the same steadiness that had always been there, that had always looked like smallness to the people who had not known what they were looking at. Cade watched from wherever he was in the room. He did not push. He did not make promises. He began, quietly and without announcement, to change the way he led, listening before speaking, asking before commanding, seeing the people around him as more than their usefulness. He did not do it for her. He did it because seeing her clearly had shown him how much smaller he had made himself by refusing to see. One evening, near dusk, Serafina stood alone at the edge of the Vale River. The silver light in her skin was quiet. The water moved gently. Behind her, at a respectful distance, she heard footsteps stop. Cade, she knew without turning. He did not speak. He did not come closer. He was simply there. She did not walk away. The river kept moving, easy and unhurried, the way things move when they have all the time they need to find where they are going.